Welcome to another edition of the News Review. In this edition, French President Emmanuel Macron says that he does not rule out sending fighter jets to Ukraine, but it is impossible to do so in the coming weeks.
It is essential that the Allies prioritize the equipment that is the most useful for the ultimate effect sought by Ukrainian troops and the fastest one. In no case can fighter jets be delivered in the coming weeks because there are delays in training, delivery and training that cannot be avoided as Ukrainian pilots are unfamiliar with these aircrafts. So I'm not ruling it out at all, but it does not meet the need today.
Macron believes the priority should be on items like artillery, which Ukrainian forces were already trained on. The French president was speaking at the end of an EU summit that was also attended by his Ukrainian counterpart. After the summit, Volodymyr Zelensky told reporters that a number of European leaders had said that they are ready to supply fighter jets. Russia has warned that the delivery of aircraft and long-range missiles to Ukraine would only prolong the war. Moscow has also rejected Kiev's pledge that it will not use long-range Western arms against Russian territory. It argues that Ukraine has time and again shown it is untrustworthy to make agreements. To discuss that further, we're joined by Fred Weir, journalist and political commentator, joining us from Moscow. Also, we have with us Gilbert Doctorow, independent and international affairs analyst from Brussels. Thank you very much to both of you, gentlemen. Let's begin with Mr. Weir. Now, we have heard Russians warning Ukrainians time and again, saying that these weapons will only prolong the war. Ukraine still is trying to get more weapons from NATO rather than trying to find a diplomatic solution to the ongoing war. What is Zelensky seeking exactly?
Well, when it comes to the main battle tanks and fighter aircraft and such, I think the political process going on here is to try to lock in long-term relations. I think that's what these items aren't coming to Ukraine anytime soon, and they might never. But I think it's about the politics of getting long-term commitments in place for Ukraine, and certainly something like fighter jets. It's months and months of training. There's a whole lot of things that go with moving a fighter jet, into even in peacetime in allied countries. It's years go into integrating a new fighter plane into the Air Force. In the midst of a war, I just don't find that very credible. It's about politics.
So, Mr. Doctorow, in your opinion, why doesn't Zelensky try to find a diplomatic solution to the war in Ukraine and alleviate the suffering of its nation?
He doesn't try to do that because it's not welcome to his sponsors, the United States in particular. They want a long, drawn-out war, as they explained at various occasions, in order to weaken Russia and to take Russia into a position of hopeless future, where it poses no threats to the United States, so the United States can move on to its confrontation with China. But let's not be naive about what Mr. Zelensky is up to. What he's up to is to bring Europe into a full-blown war with Russia. And Europe, willy-nilly, is incrementally moving in that direction. The question that the Russians have put this diplomatically, saying that additional delivery of highly sophisticated offensive weapons to Ukraine will draw out the war. That is a bit euphemistic. The delivery of these weapons can very possibly make the sponsors, the suppliers of these weapons, co-belligerents in the ongoing war.
Well, Mr. Doctorow, if they, of course, Mr. Weir disagrees, and he says this is mostly political, but if they do deliver these weapons that Ukraine needs, wouldn't there be the possibility of this war escalating into something more serious?
Well, as Mr. Weir has said, the likelihood of any of this being delivered in the coming 6 months is close to nil. I think that we're looking in the wrong direction right now in our discussion. The elephant in the room is not the F-16s. The elephant in the room is the promise of the British in the last couple of days to deliver long-range missiles to Ukraine. That will not require 6 months or a year of training. That would be something usable in the coming days or weeks. And if that is delivered, and if it is used as intended to strike at Russian heartland and targets in the Crimea, then we're right into World War III.
Exactly. And Mr. Weir, what is your opinion regarding the elephant in the room, as Mr. Doctor pointed to the missiles that will be delivered by the UK and the chance of this war escalating into something international?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. The missiles are an escalation. And what we learned from reading the Washington Post this morning is that American intelligence sources are rather openly admitting that they do the targeting for Ukraine when they're firing these kind of missiles. I mean, it's logical because the United States has the satellite surveillance systems in place and so on, and they're but it is again a bit jarring to note just how deeply involved American personnel are, not just American weapons that get pushed across the border and the Ukrainians use them. There is a system, a NATO alliance, which is basically integrating Ukraine, and it's up to it's not about these tanks or those rifles or these missiles. It's a whole system that is coming into place, and that is what's going to drag them into World War III.
So, Mr. Doctorow, do you see any possibilities of any negotiations anytime soon?
Well, it's not whether I see it, it's whether Washington sees it. And I don't think Washington wants to hear about negotiations for the very reasons I said in my opening statement. Washington wants to use the war to destroy the Russian armies and forces. And
I'm sorry to cut you off right there, but Mr. Doctorow, it has proven to be a failure. And we also heard Vladimir Putin today saying that his economy is even back on the right track. So basically, this does not seem to be the right plan to follow.
Well, I wouldn't want to do cheerleading for Russia. We in what I would call a dissident community, we look at the mainstream media and the American political establishment is living in a bell jar. But I have to say that it is also possible to observe as an outsider that the dissidents, or those who are cheerleading Russia on in the West, are also in a bell jar. If you listen closely to Russian state television, which has very nuanced coverage of the events, you hear in the last few days a certain war weariness and understanding that it right now is in a position war, and that the outcome of the major offensive that the Russians are now undertaking is not 100% secure. War is never 100% predictable, and the outcomes never are certain. Therefore, I think we have to proceed with a certain amount of prudence with respect to Russia's ability to deliver on all that it has promised to itself. I wish them a lot of luck, but let's stand by and see day by day what progress they make and at what cost in man and material.
Okay, and to wrap this up, Mr. Weir, what is your opinion regarding the future of this war? How is this moving forward? In which direction?
The longer it goes on, the more it escalates. That's what we've been talking about. And it's already just horrific, what they call the butcher's bill when it becomes known on both sides. It's going to be traumatic and history changing. We're already there, but as it escalates, it threatens to become something so much worse. I don't think I don't see the outlines of a peace settlement. People are, at least nowadays, you see a lot of talk about Korea solutions and such, but there has to be one. And the sooner big countries, West and East, get together and start working on that and twisting arms, the sooner this horror show can end.
Thank you very much, Fred Weir, journalist and political commentator from Moscow, also Gilbert Doctorow, independent international affairs analyst from Brussels. Thanks for sharing your thoughts and views with us on this edition of the News Review. And thanks to all of you viewers for watching this edition.